Thank you, Bob. Thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate you giving me a chance to speak with you today. And as Bob said, I am a hockey player, so I'm going to start out with a hockey story. Has anybody here had your ear cut off?
Not this year.
Not this year? So anybody play ice hockey? Maybe growing up, pond hockey, street hockey, men's league, whatever. Well, I was playing in a men's league, and we were getting pummeled by this team. And we were shorthand. We were on a power play, only we were man down. And the defenseman looked at me, and I looked at him. He had the puck, so he banked it off the boards, and I went running, skating up. And as I was going into the zone, it was me and the goalie. And the goalie started coming out, and I said to myself, the only way I can get that puck past him is if I dive. So as he's coming out, I lunged forward with my stick, trying to push the puck past him. Well, as I got to him, he went down into a butterfly, and I felt this pinch on the side of my head. And I took my glove out, I went like that, and I saw blood. I'm like, all right, so I'm cut. I go grab the keys, go to the locker room. One of the guys comes in with me. My brother was on the team. He stayed on the ice, kept playing. The period ends, and my brother comes in and says, are you all right? And I said, well, this is going to sound kind of weird, but I want you to see if you can find my ear. Because the skate blade had actually taken off the bottom of my ear. It was mostly the earlobe. And so they went out and they had a search and rescue, and they found my earlobe on the ice, and they brought it in. And the only thing I had to put it in was a cup bag, because a guy had bought a new cup that night, and the plastic bag was in the garbage, so I threw the skin, it was just a chunk of skin. So I go into the restroom, and I'm looking, and I see all this blood on my chest, and I went like this, and here I had a laceration in my neck.
Oh.
And so I went out, and I said to the guy who was with me, I said, I think we better hurry up. And I did like this, and he's like, so we go to the emergency room in Chester County, and walked in, and there's no one in the emergency room. I don't know if you've ever been to a hospital emergency room, but there's a bunch of patients, but there's no staff.
Right.
So I burst through the doors, and the nurses were all like glaring at me and said, what? And I went like this. They grabbed me, put me on a gurney. Guy ran over, checked, and here it had missed my carotid and jugular. And so as I was laying on that gurney, and I'm looking at this bloody towel that I'd brought with me, and we threw on the floor, I was just thinking to myself, God, you're not done with me yet. Because a quarter of an inch deeper, and it took 2 layers of stitches to stitch that wound. And the funny part is that the surgeon came in to take care of my neck, and he looked at my ear and he says, we're just going to leave that off, and I'll do plastic surgery and recreate your ear. And I thought, what have I got to lose? I put it back on. So all right, so he sews it on. That was Wednesday night. Saturday, I took off for Arizona to go to a class, and at 30,000 feet, and I was drinking a few alcohol beverages, and I went into the restroom, and my ear was as white as this sheet until I got up to that elevation, and I looked, and it was starting to turn purple. And by the time we landed, the blood had pushed its way back into that detached skin, and the doctor said to me, it'll never take at your age. And what he doesn't know is when I hit 50, I started going backwards. So I'm now 43, so you guys can figure out the math. But that ear actually took, and it's my natural ear today. So again, Mike Shannon, and what I'd like to share with you is just my testimony. And I'll tell you, I am just an average guy. I didn't push a wheelchair from Anchorage to DC like Mike King did. Or has anybody seen the movie 127 Hours? It's the story. Have you heard of the hiker who got trapped and he actually cut his arm off? His name is Aaron Ralston. We just watched that movie last weekend, and I did a little bit of research on it. He actually, and the movie, based on what I've read, the movie does a really good job of explaining exactly what happened to him. And if you imagine, he stepped on a rock and it cut loose and he fell in a chasm, and his arm got pinched from about here up by this rock, and he tried for 5 days to loosen it and he couldn't. So I don't have any dramatic stories like that. I don't have any burning bush. Yeah, my ear I almost lost my life. I almost bled out on the ice, but aside from that, I'm just a regular kind of guy. So I'd just like to share with you how I became a Christian, and then maybe a little bit about what I'm doing today. And the story, I grew up Catholic, so I called myself Catholic for 35 years. And one day I was at the kitchen washing the dishes, and my daughter, who's 3 years old, was going to Windsor Baptist Preschool, and she's sitting there singing, Jesus Loves Me, This I Know. And it was like the angels were speaking to me, because within a couple of weeks, I decided to take my 2 kids to church so they could get religion. The problem is, as I was leaving church, this guy greeted me at the door and reach your head out. It was like, "Hey, partner, I've never seen you here before. What's your name?" And I'm like, "Give me my hand back, I'll tell you." And Ron Fritz actually witnessed to me that you can be a guy, a man, and be a Christian. And that was the first time that I realized that. You know, growing up in the Catholic Church, all I heard was "thou shalt not." And as I started going to church, I started going to Bible study, I read the Bible for the first time, I came across this verse, John 10:10. Some of you may know it. The back part of it, it's not even the whole verse. "I have come that they would have life and have it to the full." And that was the first time that I saw religion in a new light, and that Jesus came so that I could live a full life. And that's something that I don't know what happened to my, I went to Catholic school for a couple of years. I don't know what happened to all that education, but it was long lost. And so that began my walk, and that was 23 years ago, I think. Ron and I attended some Promise Keeper events, and I remember coming home from one of those. Anybody ever go to Promise Keepers? I don't know if they're still doing them or not, but great events. And at one of those Promise Keepers, it was down at RFK in DC, it was an overcast day, and then all of a sudden the clouds just parted right over that stadium, and the sunlight came through, and I realized then that Christ is actually a role model for me. And the next Sunday, Ron, I think you asked if anybody wanted to come forward, and I jumped up out of the pew and I ran up and I said, "Ron, I figured it out at Promise Keepers." I said, "Christ is a role model. He's something for me to try to aspire to, or a lifestyle that I should try to live." And I am far from a saint. I'm a sinner just as much as the next person. And right now I'm participating in a couple different Bible studies because I could use the word every single day. And it just gives me an opportunity to share and fellowship with other guys who are going through the exact same things that we are. And I had a lot of doubts. We had a lay group come into Fairview Presbyterian where I was attending. I think it was after Ron left, actually. He deserted us because he felt a calling to become the senior chaplain at West Point or something. Fairview Presbyterian, Glenmore, West Point. I couldn't see the attraction myself, but so this lay group came in and they told a sermon about Moses and the burning bush, and they were talking about how, God said to Moses, "What is that in your hand?" And he said, "A staff." He said, "Throw it down," and he threw it down and it turned into a snake. Well, that was at a time when I was just having a lot of doubts. It just seemed too cliche-ish, too easy, and something about that sermon just struck home with me, and I said, "You know what, I'm just going to, all those doubts that I have, I'm just going to throw them down and say, forget about it." It's just, why live life questioning as opposed to just believing? In fact, my wife's aunt passed away about 2 months ago, and through her whole illness, she was just a rock. She was very stoic, and her granddaughter asked her, "Grandma, how come you're so strong? How can you be so positive?" She had chemo and dialysis. I mean, she really suffered. And she just said one word. She said, "Believe." That was like her final word. She dropped into a coma the next day and passed away. So she told her family, "Believe." And there's a woman who knew the Lord. I'm not sure how active she was in her walk through her whole life, but so that was kind of how I became a Christian. And the last thing I want to address is the service aspect of what I do. And this is not me, but there's a couple things that I've been involved with. One is the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and the second is the Bridge Academy Community Center and the BACC. Anybody familiar with that in Coatesville? It's a faith-based community center that serves that inner city population in Coatesville. And it's the kids. So we start in first grade and go up through senior year of high school. And every night of the week through the school night, there's a couple women who cook meals for anywhere from 20 to 30 people. 4 nights a week they're doing this. And we bring the kids in, we feed them, we love on them, we give them a Bible lesson, and then we play some games with them. So it's really a safe haven for them. And Tyler, that's actually his full-time job right now. He's serving full-time in ministry at the Bridge Academy. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to get really close with a very needy population. And most of those kids, you know, they're living in fatherless households. And, you know, I think just being a father figure to them, like here's an old guy, he's, you know, old enough to be my dad, and he's coming here and just talking with me and talking about the Lord. And, you know, it's just a different relationship that they experience anywhere else. And then the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Ron actually mentioned to me a dozen years before I got involved that that would be a ministry that would be really good for me with my sports interest and all that. And who's familiar with FCA? You guys all heard the name, right? You know, and it's where we empower kids to go in and do ministry in the schools. And the beauty of it is there's not a youth minister in the country who wouldn't want to have the access that FCA has to the schools, because we're a sanctioned club. And the kids lead the huddles, the kids do it all. So it's kids reaching other kids. It's a little bit different model than Young Life that Bob was involved with for 25 years or whatever. So I just think it's a fabulous ministry. And I serve on the Philadelphia area board until the end of this year, and I'm starting at Chester County board. So if any of you happen to have an interest, you know, we really need some folks to come along. The model is we hire a full-time rep and they go work with the kids. And these reps are Tyler's age. You know, they're 20-something right out of college. And they go in and they train the kids, and then they mentor them and work with them as they run these Bible studies in the schools. Just in closing, what I've realized, and I came to this on my own, although I've since learned that Mary Kay Ash and Zig Ziglar and all these other people talk, mind, body, spirit. That for us to be a truly happy, content person, you've really got to address all three of those areas. And mind that's just continuous learning. It's continually staying active. And you know, I was fortunate 7 years ago to get into the business I'm in, which is training companies' sales organizations and helping them recruit salespeople. And there's just an unlimited amount of knowledge. I think I've read 75 different business books in the last 5 years or so. I mostly listen to them while I'm driving and working out. I don't read that much, but I listen to them a lot, you know, because it's a very convenient format for me. And that stimulation of my mind, I think, has been really helpful. Helped me since I turned 50 anyway, the last 7 years, to stay more, you know, mentally active. Body, of course, is working out, and I don't know how active you guys are, but again, when I crossed that 50 line, it was like, holy cow. You know, the puck is like sliding by, and I'm trying to reach out, and you know, I try to stop this guy, he's blowing by me, and I used to be able to put a shoulder in and he'd stop him, and now it's just like. So I started lifting weights. I work out 3 days a week. I play hockey 2 days a week. You know, you saw my license plate says hunt and fish. You know, I get out and hunt. It doesn't say scratch golfer, which, you know, Bob unfortunately had to suffer with me in my 100-plus score today. But so, you know, staying physically active, and the older we get, I think the more important that is, because it's, you know, our bodies just deteriorate. But I think we can slow the decline. And then, of course, the spiritual piece. And the spiritual piece is just staying active in the Word and staying active in fellowship like that. That's my story, and I just want to close with, I'm not sure that God is done with any of you guys yet either. And you didn't have to cut your neck for you to realize that perhaps, but I hope you're inspired a little bit by what I said tonight. So, thank you.